in Louisiana, terrible happened, was Charles Barkley would say terrible actually happened. And again, I think for a lot of people who sat at home are now going to realize once certain policies now come into play, they're going to realize the mistake that they actually made by sitting at home. There are a couple of people who they've been tweeting lots of information. They've been covering what happened there. And I really think what happened in Louisiana is instructive for folks here in Virginia. We got upcoming elections in Mississippi, governor races in Mississippi, in Kentucky, and what happened there can also teach us and get us ready for it next year for the presidential race as well. Dr. Robert Collins, professor of urban studies and public policy, he's at Dillard University. He joins us out of New Orleans. Glad to have you here. John Cavillion. John is the founder and CEO of JMC Analytics and Polling out of Baton Rouge. Glad to have both of you here. John, I want to start with you. I sort of want to set this. I've really been looking at the tweets that you've been posting, breaking down the data. And so, first off, for folks who aren't familiar with the state, how many eligible registered voters are there in the state of Louisiana?
So the total voter registration is approximately 3 million in Louisiana.
Okay, so you got about 3 million in Louisiana. Okay. How many people actually voted in this year's election?
So turnout was 36%, so it was just over 1 million total voters.
So you have leadership in the state elected by barely 1/3 of all voters.
In the strictest technical sense, yes.
And for African Americans, you got more than 900,000 African Americans who are registered voters in Louisiana, correct?
Correct. They're about 31% of the electorate.
31% of the electorate, and we made up what percentage of this year's election?
My estimate, based on the precinct data I saw and the early voting data, I'm estimating an approximately 24% black electorate when all is said and done.
Whoa. So not 24% of those who voted. Of all those voters, all the black voters in Louisiana, 24% of the 900,000.
Correct.
Robert, I'm in a church. I'm trying not to cuss. But, Robert, what the hell happened?
Well, Roland, today I went and did some unscientific polling, and what I did was I walked through City Park in New Orleans, and I asked people whether or not they voted. I didn't ask them how they voted because that's private, but I asked people whether or not they voted, and if they said no, I didn't vote, and I asked why didn't you vote? And the responses I got was normally along the lines, well, it's not going to matter anyway. We're a conservative state, no matter what you do. It doesn't matter if Jeff Landry won in the primary or in the general. He was going to win in the general election anyway. So I got a lot of old boss, new boss, same as the old boss. Kind of responses. Basically, I think what happened, Roland, was two things. Number one, there was sort of an air of inevitability around Jeff Landry. He has led this election from wire to wire. He had by far, the most money. He had over $10 million raised. Over $10 million. He still had a lot of money in the bank because he expected a runoff, so he didn't even spend all of his money in the primary. He only participated in one debate, and despite that, in all the pollings, he led wire to wire, and so he was locked in. Most people did expect a runoff, even up until yesterday. So it was basically a surprise yesterday, and I think what happens when you get voters in their mind, when they get this air of inevitability locked in, then the election becomes boring to them. And if it becomes boring, they don't participate. The thing about Louisiana voters are used to really, big, large, colorful personalities, interesting people. We're the home of, Huey Long and Edwin Edwards and really outsized characters. And when you have sort of a low key race like this and you don't have, colorful characters, people get bored and they stay home. And then the second issue is we don't really have a legitimate opposition party in the state of Louisiana right now. The Louisiana Democratic Party has no real structure to it. And so it is not a get out the vote. Doesn't have a get out the vote apparatus. It doesn't have a candidate recruitment apparatus. So you don't have Democratic candidates down ballot to help with.
Robert. Hold up, Robert. Freeze right there. How in the world does the Louisiana Democratic Party not have a get out the vote apparatus? That's what they're there for.
Yeah. Well, they don't have the money. They don't raise the money. Roland yesterday, and John can speak to this as well. I'll just say this. Yesterday, as you know, I serve as a political analyst for WVUE Fox 8 down here in New Orleans, and I did 4 hours of live television last night. I stood on the set and did 4 hours of continuous analysis. And at the end of the night, the anchor asked me closing thoughts, and I said closing thoughts are the Louisiana Democratic Party basically needs to be, if we are going to have a legitimate two-party system in the state of Louisiana, then the Louisiana Democratic Party basically should be burned to the ground and basically reconstructed from the ground up with all new people, because the people that they have now are not doing the job at all.
John, this is where I'm confused here. John Bel Edwards is the governor. He's a Democrat. So typically when you talk about who's over your party, it's the person at the top. That would be governor. Yeah, you have a party chair. Nationally, Joe Biden is the head of the Democratic Party. Okay, Jamie Harrison is the chair, but the reality is Biden and his team are actually calling the shots. What happened in Louisiana is an utter disgrace. I mean, I don't know. There's no other way to call it. How do you have a sitting governor who's Democrat, and the person who is running is Jeff Landry, who is a hardcore Trump MAGA candidate who has an absolutely horrible record, especially when it comes to African Americans, and Democrats literally put up no fight against him?
Well, there are a couple of additional pieces to the puzzle that need to be discussed here, because those are some very interesting points. We've already discussed the lower black turnout that I saw, not just in early voting, but especially with election day voting. But one thing I saw, not only with my polling, but on election night results, is this. Jeff Landry consistently polled at 8% amongst black voters, which for Republicans is pretty impressive. Along comes election day, and when I looked at the precinct data where 70% or more of the registered voters are black, I saw that John Bel Edwards got 91% of that vote in the 2019 primary. In the 2023 primary, which has just concluded, not only did Sean Wilson get about 70% of that vote, but Jeff got 12%. And if you were to restrict your analysis to the 60 less urban parishes, in other words, everything but East Baton Rouge, everything but Caddo, everything but Jefferson, everything but Orleans, Jeff's vote share went up to 16%. In other words, we're talking about more of the rural black constituencies. So I think that those additional data points that I just brought up are things that need to be discussed within the Democratic Party hierarchy.
Robert, explain that to me. How does a white Democrat get 91% of the black vote, but a black gubernatorial candidate gets 70?
Well, so Jeff Landry had a very well-funded campaign, and in the last few weeks of the campaign, he put out he did some ad buys, and he put out some very strict. I mean, some very slick ads where he had black voters, including one black police officer whose son had been killed his son had been murdered, talk about crime and crime in the black community and how Jeff Landry doesn't care if you're black or white. He's gonna fight crime. And so, in fact, I take that back. He actually had two parents whose children had been murdered, black parents that appeared in several ads for him. So, so he had well funded. He did get the endorsement of at least one black Democrat in New Orleans, a gentleman named Austin Badon, who is a former three-term state legislator, state representative. I think we can expect Austin to show up in a Jeff Landry administration in some appointed role. So basically, he did spend money. His ad people were very good and were very professional, and they did spend money putting black faces on television, saying, we endorse Jeff Landry. We think he's a good man. We think, again, specifically focusing on the crime issue, which is obviously a hot point in urban areas, and those ads worked. I mean, those ads were designed specifically to peel off segments of the black vote, and they worked. I think you would have to say they were effective. He got his money's worth out of those ads.
But isn't this the same Jeff Landry who wanted to make public the juvenile records of kids 13 and older in only 3 parishes in the state, and those were the black parishes?
It is, but honestly, Roland, I don't think that issue resonated to the extent that that it should have. Or that you would have thought that it would have. So, because I'm still trying to understand. Again, look, if I'm on the outside looking at who a person is and their record, and he now gets elected, he now has a super majority in the Louisiana legislature. They can do whatever they want, like in Florida and Texas, in Georgia and other places. Now all of a sudden, the things that he wanted to do, they can now do, and they can't be stopped. So folk actually voted for that? Well, folks voted for it because they didn't think that their vote was going to make any difference. So I mean, again, there are some black voters that thought that he was the law and order candidate, and they're scared of crime. And even though I would point out that in Louisiana, the governor has very little to do with fighting crime. Crime is fought at the local level by police chiefs and elected sheriffs and mayors and elected district attorneys. It's just the way our Constitution and our statutes work.
But I'm glad you brought that up, John. 63 sheriffs were on the ballot across Louisiana. All 63 are men. 57 out of the 63 are white men. There was one sheriff who runs a horrible jail. It is in a blue county, and the Democrats didn't even have somebody running against him. How can you stand? First of all, how can you have a shot at winning if you don't run?
Well, there's also another piece of the puzzle that needs to be discussed here, is that same group of sheriffs who endorsed Jeff Landry had endorsed Governor John Bel Edwards before, whose brother, by the way, is the sheriff of Tangipahoa Parish. So in other words, I think you have to look at this more holistically than just the example you have provided.
No. But I'm still raising the critical question, because I've said this, and Reverend William Barber has said this all across the South. The guaranteed way for you never to win is you never run somebody. And so Robert talked about how the party has to be blown up top to bottom. Is that part of the problem in that? Because it's not like you have few Democrats who are registered in Louisiana. You got a significant number. But what is happening in this state where they're not running folks in a lot of these positions? And I do these stories all the time. I can't tell you how many times I've had to do stories about somebody being shot or beaten by cops in Louisiana. The young folks who were thrown in Angola when the federal judge ordered them to be released, in a week. I mean, I've done numerous stories. How is the Louisiana Democratic Party not using those things to recruit candidates and to run folks in this state? Because what took place on Saturday is an absolute national embarrassment, with the second largest population of African Americans of any state in America.
Well, when you talk about the embarrassment, I think there's something else that needs to be discussed as well, and that is there's an implicit assumption that black voters would always be nearly unanimously Democratic, and I've seen that begun to change in very recent times, specifically since the pandemic started. Donald Trump, for instance, received double the percentage of the black votes he received in 2016, and while that's not yet a statistically large number, when I see data points like that, and Jeff Landry getting 12% and 16% in more rural parishes. Billy Nungesser, our lieutenant governor, got 30% of the black vote. I think the assumption of black voters being automatically wed to the Democratic Party is perhaps one that is changing as we speak.
Well, first of all, that is the case, Robert. Now, I broke this thing down because young African Americans are not self-identifying. That's why I didn't make the point about party. I made the point about issues. And so, Robert, from your vantage point, how is the Louisiana Democratic Party not pinpointing those issues that African Americans care about and then not using that to their advantage in elections?
Well, the Louisiana Democratic Party doesn't have an issue operation. It doesn't have as I said before, doesn't have a candidate recruitment operation. If you talk to local candidates on the ground, like let's say Democrats that are running for state representative in New Orleans, and you ask them, has the party done anything for you? They would say no. They said that they will tell you flat out, Louisiana Democratic Party is irrelevant. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't do anything for them because they don't raise any money for them. I mean, look at the disparities in the amount of money that they raise for Sean Wilson, let's say, compared to the amount of money that right next door the Mississippi Democratic Party raised for Brandon Presley. It's not even close. Brandon, they raised millions for Brandon Presley. They raised what, like 50,000 for Sean Wilson. So it really is, the party has been impotent for some time now. But in terms of their ability to get out to mobilize people and get out the vote, but at least they had a messaging operation before. At least they could, they would message on behalf of the candidates. Right now, I can tell you the current chair of the Louisiana Democratic Party was basically invisible in this last cycle. And when I say invisible, I mean literally. I don't mean figuratively. I mean literally. Nobody knows where she is. Nobody has seen her. She's in hiding. So so that's a problem when you don't have a Democratic Party chair who's visible, who's out visiting candidates to see what they need. It is a structurally bankrupt, physically bankrupt organization that's just going to have to be completely reformed from top to bottom. I mean, they've been at crisis level for some time now, but now they're beyond crisis level. They're basically not salvageable at this point. They're not salvageable in their current form, and it probably took them failing to get a gubernatorial candidate into a runoff for the first time in modern history to let the general public see that.
John, I saw one story that said in the last in this campaign, the Republicans spent about $1.2 million, and Democrats only spent $28,000. Correct?
You're referring to black outreach or something broader, like just general campaign spends?
I was looking at in terms of what parties spent. Robert, did you come across that? I saw several tweets stating that. Did you come across that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I came across some tweets that just basically comparing just general spending to the between the Sean Wilson campaign in Louisiana and the Brandon Presley campaign in Mississippi. I mean, I'm not sure the exact amounts. I thought it was around 50,000, but it's in the tens of thousands as opposed. And again, we're talking about Democratic Party spending. We're not talking about money that Sean Wilson has raised himself. He raised a lot more than that. But as far as the assistance that he got from the Democratic Party, it was like in the tens of thousands, whereas Brandon Presley in Mississippi is literally getting millions of dollars in help from the Mississippi Democratic Party, which I'm assuming they're raising from out of state and bringing into the state. But the Louisiana Democratic Party doesn't even have any apparatus like that where they ask for money from the DNC, or they have some dark money groups outside the state that raise money for them. They don't have any similar apparatus.
Hey, John, I got a kick out of the one story, how the governor and other Democrats were targeting a progressive Democrat in New Orleans area for defeat. And someone said, wow, only Louisiana Democrats could spend more money and time trying to defeat one of their own than the opposing party. Explain that.
And I'll admit to you that was something, Roland, that genuinely puzzled me, because the district that you're referring to, which, by the way, is down the road from where Dr. Collins' school is, but the district we're referring to is a solidly progressive district, and Mandy Landry, who is the incumbent state representative, fits it like a glove. So the thing which I will admit to you I don't understand the rationale for is, if she fits her district like a glove, why would the governor spend, or should I say divert, resources to getting her defeated when he should have been keeping his eye on the ball and helping Sean Wilson? And by the way, the challenger to
she got 66% of the vote.
Correct. And my polls showed her she was always solidly in the lead. So it is a question of misplaced priorities that I genuinely don't understand, especially since there were allegations about the challenger, who Governor Edwards endorsed, had a history of voting in a Republican primary before. So, I think we're talking about far broader issues than just Sean Wilson. We're talking about a misplacement of focus and priorities.
Yeah,
All right, last couple of questions from.
Okay, I just say
go ahead.
To add on to what John was saying. Yeah, so not only did the challenger have the endorsement of the governor, she had the endorsement of Congressman Troy Carter. She had the endorsement of former U.S. Senator Mary Landry. She basically had the endorsement of every major Democratic organization, every black elected official in the city of New Orleans. And the excuse, we were told, is because Mandy Landry was not a team player with the Democratic Party. Basically, she got mad because she ran for state senate in a special election last year, against another Democrat. She didn't win, so temporarily she switched her voter registration to independent. Now, she did switch back to Democrat a few weeks later, or a few months later, but the Democratic Party said that they were going to punish her because she wasn't a team player and she wasn't a real Democrat, so they were going to run a real Democrat against her. But just the fact that she crushed them. Now, here's the Democratic Party organization. They said, okay, Mandy, we're gonna punish you because you're an independent and you're too progressive and you don't get along with the establishment Democrats. So we're throwing the Democratic establishment against you. Mandy said, no, it's not going to go down like that. And she literally she crushed them. She crushed them and destroyed them and sent them away. So that just shows you how weak the Louisiana Democratic Party establishment is. They can't punish anybody. Mandy, she embarrassed them. She literally embarrassed them.
Yeah, you got to feel really stupid if you endorse somebody and that person got beat with 66% of the vote with all of that firepower. And that shows they're real impotent. All right, last couple of questions for you, John. I want to start with you. We saw after the last election Florida Democrats just blew it up. Nikki Fried now is running the statewide party. What are you hearing in Louisiana? Are people ticked off, mad, upset, or is there a collective shrug like, oh, well, ain't nothing we can do. Let's just keep the same loser who blew this thing this time?
Well, I do think that given that there is increasing factionalism within the Louisiana Democratic Party between those who are primarily in New Orleans and have more of a progressive bent versus the historical base of the Louisiana Democratic Party in rural areas, that kind of factionalism is something that the current party chair has to deal with. But given the Democrats' performance in Saturday night's election, combined with the fact that you had the party apparatus going against a progressive incumbent, I see the potential for there to be some, let's just politely say, turmoil and unrest when party elections come soon.
Robert, are folks looking to plant grenades in this party and just blow it all up in the state? Because this has to be embarrassing. And if you are a member of Congress or you're a representative or I mean, you're a state representative, state senator or whatever, you should be just grossly offended by what took place. I mean, I get losing, but they lost like they would. What's that team that played IMG, the football, that wasn't even a real high school, and they got blown out? That's what it looked like for Louisiana Democrats on Saturday.
Well, I can tell you
that was Bishop Sycamore. That was Bishop Sycamore. They weren't even a real team, a real school.
Yeah, well, I can tell you who's really fired up. The progressive wing of the party, the people that supported Mandy Landry, they're fired up right now. And the establishment folks are sort of in hiding right now because they know that they're going to get the blame for the loss yesterday. So they really haven't, come out with any statements. They haven't really said anything, basically because they know folks are going to be coming for them. They know folks are going to be coming for their heads, basically. So so I would agree with John. And in the next round of elections for a Democratic State Central Committee, and all the various parish executive committees, I think you will see a slew of progressives running against the more moderate establishment Democrats, and I think you're gonna see some knockdown, drag out races, and we're gonna have a struggle for the soul of the party, and people are gonna have to make a decision. Is the party gonna just settle for its position as an irrelevant party and basically try and form coalitions with the Republicans in the state legislature? That's what I expect them to do in the short term. I expect the old line groups like the Legislative Black Caucus to form as a bloc, and what they normally do is that, like, for example, there'll be a Speaker of the House election, there'll be a conservative candidate and a more moderate candidate, and they'll try and cut deals with the more moderate candidate and swing their bloc behind the more moderate candidate, and in return ask for some committee chairmanships or some other considerations. That's what they're going to do in the short term. But in the long term, I think the progressives are coming for everybody. I think the progressives are coming for everybody's head.
All right. Well, John and Robert, I've been loving the tweets that y'all have been posting, giving people a real important insight to what's been happening there in Louisiana. And look, again, what happens is when you don't show up, now Republicans have a supermajority. They can do whatever they want. They control the House, the Senate, the governor's mansion. Again, that's power. And again, in a state that is the second largest concentration of African Americans in the country, that's problematic. And we see how Mississippi has gone. And then we look at what's happening all across the South in Texas and Florida and Tennessee and Georgia. And so I think a lot of folk over the next 4 years are going to be saying, we better wake up and pay attention and make some changes, or this thing could get even worse. Gentlemen, thanks a lot.
Thank you.